Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our next session today, I'd like to welcome, hello, delighted to welcome John Holroyd here, who is a teacher, he's a writer, he's well known to many of us, some of his talks in philosophy of all, and he's in the process of writing a book on this title, Judging Religion, which is pretty topical at the moment, yeah? And what we're going to do is, for the first half of this session, I'm going to ask a few questions, give John a chance to introduce his book, where he's coming from, the particular angles he's taking. And then in the second half, so from about half past 6 onwards, the floor will be open, you'll be very welcome to make your comments, ask your questions, and respond. So let's go, John, Judging Religion. Could you start by saying what it's all about, where you're coming from, what you want to achieve?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'll say a couple of things about really what's motivating me to write about this. Some time ago, I picked up Richard Dawkins' his book, and started to look through Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, looked a little bit at Daniel Dennett as well. And one thing that did strike me was that none of these writers, while they are philosophers, generally speaking, none of them are religious studies scholars. And I started to leaf through and look at the references to Ninian Smart, the references to Wilfred Cantwell Smith, some of the key people who have really pioneered religious studies and as an interdisciplinary concern. I found that they really, from what I could see, hadn't really come across these people. And then the second thing that I did was to have a look at Keith Ward, Peter Vardy, Alistair McGrath, some of the defenders of religion. And the kind of conclusion that I reached was that, in fact, there was more polemic than analysis. I mean, for example, it comes out in Christopher Hitchens' kind of writing very briefly about Martin Luther King, where he reaches the quite extraordinary conclusion that Martin Luther King was not a Christian, on the basis of the fact that King seems to have done some significant good. Religion does no significant good, therefore Martin Luther King cannot have been a Christian. And it strikes me that we do need to be concerned with empirical analysis and critical analysis, and so I'm interested to write from a different place. I am an atheist. I'm not a committed atheist. If someone can convince me that there's a God, fine, I'll believe in a God. But I want to write from some middle ground and something that does not have a kind of scheduled trajectory, really. And that's part of the excitement of the whole enterprise for me. I think the second thing is that I have been concerned. Cardiff University did some research into the references to Islam within the media and found out that for 1,400 references to Islam that it studied, only 2 were positive. And while there are more than some concerns about developments within Islam today, both in Britain and elsewhere, that's blindingly obvious, that still this seemed to me to not be balanced. And so I wanted to get beneath some of what we're hearing about and do some research. And finally, a passion that struck me when I was an undergraduate was that religion can be studied academically. It's an incredibly important concern. It's important as an interdisciplinary venture, and it's something that isn't being spoken about, and it needs to be something that we're all really, really interested in. So those are things that motivate me. What I'm aiming to do is to write really about religion today, not so much, I'm not a historian, I would never ever claim to be a historian. I could never write in great depth about the Crusades, for example. And so I want to look at really Christianity and Islam as they're practiced now. I want to look as well at a moral evaluation of them. I mean, there are umpteen books written about whether or not there's a God. I don't want to really focus specifically on that kind of question. I want to look much more at, well, what's the moral output of religion? That's really my primary interest, really. And look at ways in which we can get at that question. So, for example, I want to look at civil religion, institutional religion, world-denying religions, look at some of these categories that sociologists of religion employ, and see if we can get a bit more of a picture of things. One sociologist of religion, for example, David Martin, speaks about differentiated and undifferentiated religion, to speak about the amalgam of religion and politics, and forms of religion that are more disentangled from politics. Now, are these useful categories? What insights can these kinds of ways of looking at things give us, really? So that's part of my way of thinking, and part of where I'm aiming. And it is, as I say, an adventure. I haven't reached, since I've started the book, some of my views have changed a little. I haven't started out with an agenda that I seek to prove. Okay, so that's a little bit.
Thank you, that's very helpful. But within that, what you just said seems to be two distinct overlapping threads. One is the state of dialogue between the proponents of different religions, so the strident atheists, those who defend an intellectual, pretty intellectual type of religion, Keith Ward's type of position, and presumably those who defend sort of absolutist, here's my holy text, you better believe it kind of religion. So it's a dialogue between them, whereas, as you say, there's sometimes a bit more heat and light. And then there's the study of religion, what its social effects, which I suppose you could undertake without any commitment to any religion. If we could focus on that first dialogue, so it's one where perhaps people are most excited. So between the proponents of different positions of religion. One option is to say, right, hey, it's all relative. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, we won't argue. Yeah. One option is to say, I'm blind, you're wrong. Yeah. And do you think there's a sort of, any kind of compromise position, anything different? What could we do in the way in which that dialogue kind of works?
Yes. This is, in a way, this comes very much to a method that I want to employ in what I'm doing. Let's look at absolutism to begin with, as the view that there is one truth, and it's true in all times and places, as a perspective, really. I do have problems with absolutism. I have problems with the concept of it. If we take a phrase, known in philosophy, the view from nowhere, well, if there is no God, just for example, what concept do we have of absolutism? The idea of an absolute perspective without a subject from which to view. I think there are questions just about the concept of absolutism. And then, since what I'm seeking to do is morally evaluate religion, well, we have various methods of reaching some absolute point of view. We've got your Kantian deontology to employ rules, to follow a line of duty. We have more teleological consequentialist ethics in terms of types of utilitarianism. I both want to say this is really the method whereby you are going to reach ethical truth. On both sides, we can talk about natural law and a plethora of other proposed absolutist methods. There is no consensus methodologically either. And then we come to the content of absolutisms, whether they're, again, a plethora of Islamisms, a plethora of humanisms, Christianities, and what I also feel is clear is that the sins of absolutism are great. If we, a think it was Pope John Paul II, who said, the greatest threat to humankind is relativism. I just thought, this is astonishing. If we could line up the atrocities committed in the name of relativism, and there may be some bad things that have happened in the name of relativism, and I see huge dangers with relativism, I really do. But if we could line those up on one side, and then line up the atrocities that have happened in the name of absolutism, the various absolutisms that there be, there simply is no contest, it seems to me. Whether we're talking about religious absolutisms or political absolutisms, absolutisms have done us a great deal of harm. And I think as well that they put people in a place of contestation, that they really do rip humanity's soul apart in some fairly horrific ways before they get to violence too. So I have some real problems with absolutism, but I also have some real problems in making judgments about relativism as well. And this is where I think philosophy, really comes to the fore. If we just think about the concept of relativism, so what is true for one group of people is false for another, and vice versa. Well, is relativism absolutely true? In which case, it's false. Or is it relatively true? In which case, it can be ignored. Relativism on a basic level seems to be contradictory. And then we look at some of the practical implications of relativism too. We look, for example, well, if we can't blame someone else, then we can't praise them either. Where exactly are the boundaries between one culture and another? And do we mark those boundaries in a relativistic way, in which case it would be hard to find them? Or do we mark them in an absolutist way, in which case it would be very difficult to actually place relativism, in that jungle of judgments, in effect? Practically, in a global world, whether we're talking about environmentalism, whether we're talking about poverty, whatever we're talking about, it strikes me that relativism is really, really impractical. And so in terms of an ethical analysis in judging religion, it seems to me that both these ways forward are actually not going to be very helpful. Which raises the obvious question, well, how do we proceed? And it strikes me that we don't start in such a theoretical place. I steal the term from Charles Taylor of dialogicality. And I was at an interfaith meeting on Wednesday at London Central Mosque, and there were a range of Buddhists there, a range of Muslims, of Sikhs, of Hindus, all looking at texts from different faiths and listening to what each other had to say about the meaning of those different texts. Now, it's a very small situation. Dialogicality takes place in far more meaningful ways in several contexts. But I think we do actually need to start from the practicalities of having a listening understanding that goes on and on and on. This doesn't mean that we don't make judgments. It doesn't mean either that, frankly, in the case of ISIL, it is an existential threat to the planet, to all of humanity. And that has very, very clear consequences. I think we probably do need to oppose it with violence. Very sadly, it always has to be a last resort, but I think that is the case. There isn't a place for dialogue there. But I think we must always seek dialogue. So, to be clear, if we're talking, say, I talked, for example, I was looking at evangelism, and I spoke to the media advisor for the Elam Pentecostals. I was interested to find out really what are the effects of religion on people and on those who convert. There was something recently saying how off-putting evangelism was. So I want to start, I think it is, if we're talking about people, so I think in terms of religion, I want to start by getting the views of people within religions. But the other equally important constituent are the victims of religion too. And I want to start with that dialogue, and then move out to speak to sociologists, historians, philosophers of religion, and so on. I'm not going to reach a definitive conclusion. That's part of not being an absolutist. But I want to get somewhere further than where I am at the moment. It's an ongoing thing. It's something that is not going to be definitive. But I hope it can shed more light than heat.